This is May 1st. I want to tell you a little bit about my impressions my first week in Kyiv, a little bit longer than that in Ukraine itself, in the country. Um, this is the kind of place where you can pretty much leave your house open, can leave valuables in your car and pretty much expect them to be there when you get back, where if you go the least bit out of your way for people, they're going to more than repay you with their own kindnesses. If I could tell you just how many and the small and large kindnesses and services that people have provided in that time, and that's a little over a week, I would spend a long, long time talking about just that. These are people who we want to assist, we want to be on their side, we want them on our side, believe me. These are people with a strong spirit and will to resist, to persist, and to prevail. They will not be conquered. Kyiv is an enormous city, enormous metropolitan area. It's very spread out. It's got its high-rise sections. It's got its high-rise apartment buildings and everything else that a big city has. But it's also just an enormous area. And I've heard reports that Russia may try again. They may come back and try to take Kyiv, or they may have their allies, the Belarusians, try to do it for them. Good luck. Good luck with that. As prepared as the nation was and the city of Kyiv was 2 months ago for the Russian invasion, they are that much more so now. And I can't even imagine the size force it would take to even temporarily occupy this city, much less to conquer this nation. They will not be conquered. And I think the obvious point at this, the obvious thing to state at this point is that they have prevailed already. Early on, there was talk about how many days will the Ukraine government persist, and how long can President Zelensky remain in office? How long can he even remain alive? The Russians will be sending out agents and teams to assassination teams. Well, nobody's talking about that kind of thing now. The questions now are how long Putin can survive in office, and will Russia itself collapse? It doesn't mean that Zelensky himself is out of danger. Obviously, any president of any nation is in strong need of security this day and age. And here they are a couple hundred miles from the Belarusian border, and likewise a little further than that from Russia itself. So there's a justifiable concern for people entering the country now and what they're up to. But the attack on Kyiv the other night, Thursday evening, a little over 8 o'clock, just to talk briefly about it, without going into too much detail, there was a legitimate military target relatively nearby, but if you consider the attack itself, it pretty much epitomizes the Russian military effort in total. So you had let's say a legitimate target, but to no effect. There was no essential damage to that, and instead several missiles struck an apartment building nearby, and there were civilian casualties, 10 civilian injuries, and at least at this point, 1 civilian death. Well, I can tell you that these people's resolve will not be in any way put off. They will not be in any way thwarted or set back by such attacks. That is, as much as they hurt, as much as this is a blow, their resolve is only redoubled. And if you look at the Russian side of it, these things are just futile. It's just futility and signs of impotence and stupidity, really. And it epitomizes the entire Russian military invasion. You look at all of the areas around Kiev, and there have been, so I couldn't even begin to tally up all of the strikes against civilian targets. You know, it's as if the Russians were just randomly trying to get rid of their weaponry and to aim at whatever they could hit and just use up whatever they had and just run, flee. So an entire, I think just the word stupidity is what comes to mind. They achieved very little other than to redouble the people's willingness and will to resist them. So you look at what they're doing in the eastern part of the country now, and though they're closer to Russia and they may have a little bit better logistics and be able to get supplies to their troops a little bit better, and they may be able to persist as far as continuing the effort there for longer than they did in the Kiev area. At the end of the day, it's still the same military, and they're still doing the same things. And in fact, the force that they have to work with is weaker. They've been that much weakened by the effort towards Kiev, and the troops there have no better morale than the ones who were just sent to the Kiev area to be bombarded and to lose their lives for a losing cause. They talk about the fact that the Russians may switch or continue essentially they have the Black Sea blockaded so that Kiev cannot export, especially its grain as the harvest comes in this year, and that the Russians will redouble their effort to starve them out, to starve the country. And that seems to me like and also this is what they've started to do already in the areas that they've occupied in the eastern part of the country. So you have a convoy of Russian trucks taking Ukrainian grain back to Russia. And again, as if this is going to weaken Ukraine. And in fact, it just strengthens people's resolve to fight against them, and whatever sympathy the Russians may have had going into this in the eastern part of the country. I think that's to a large extent dissipated. And the longer Russia maintains some kind of blockade and the attempt to starve Ukraine out, I think the more it becomes a logistical challenge and not a matter of keeping Ukraine from starving so much as just figuring out how Ukraine can switch its efforts to export to the west over land as opposed to the Black Sea. So I think that's something that's solvable. They've got time. The planting season is well underway, as you see, in enormous stretches of broad farm fields and being plowed. This is a nation of farms and farmers and gardens and gardeners, and all of that is well underway. I think the other thing you see as a visitor to Kiev is the spectacular beauty of the city itself. Not only is it a vast city and metropolitan area, but it's well laid out. It's got a lot of parks, and all of these parks have play areas and play structures and playgrounds for kids, and people are out walking their dogs and out playing with their kids, and the city's trying to get back to back to life, if not to normal. People who tell me who live here tell me that the city right now is at about 10% of normalcy in terms of traffic and economic business activity and everything else, that tells me that under normal circumstances things get pretty congested during rush hour. So it's about like any other big city anywhere at this point. But you know, it's going to take time, and understandably, they don't even want people to really come back and start putting their lives back together here yet, because you know these kind of random attacks are still occurring. Um, but it's a beautiful city, and also the architecture that goes back to pre-Soviet times, especially the Tsarist era architecture, and the churches and municipal and even the apartment buildings. It's just beautiful stuff. The other area of speculation is about Putin himself and his health, and you know, I'll leave that to the doctors and the armchair shrinks. But one thing I will say is that Putin is clearly a sick man. He is a sick man to have, you know, this amount of, to be this immune to any kind of understanding of what he's doing, and to be this abhorrent in his hypocrisy. You know, this is not run-of-the-mill hypocrisy. This is true psychopathy. Someone who presumes or in any way claims to be some kind of claim to Christianity, and yet to have undertaken this kind of horrific escapade. That speaks of a spiritual sickness that is incurable. And when you combine that with the megalomania and the isolation that comes with being a pure dictator and having no true reality getting in to him to tell him what's actually going on. This is a sickness that has only one result. But the only other thing I'd point out is that anybody that has an opportunity to put Kyiv and Ukraine on their itinerary once things settle down and go back to some kind of normalcy, that kind of income from tourism will be pretty important for the country to get back on their feet economically, and it's kind of easy income for any nation to get tourist dollars, and a city that's in a country that are well worth visiting. So, you know, it'll take some time, and this is not the time, probably not the year, but Kyiv and Ukraine are well worth the visit. So the greeting here is Slovo Ukraine, and that means glory to Ukraine, and the response means glory to the heroes. This is a nation of heroes. These are the shield of Europe, the sword of Europe, and so I'll sign off by saying Slovo Ukraine, glory to Ukraine.